Trust in God when nothing makes sense. Trust that He has a plan. Do you feel lost? Do you feel confused? Do you feel like you don't know where life is going? Well, Jeremiah 29:11 says, I, the Lord, declare the plans I have for you, plans to prosper and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and hope. And those are some very strong words, I would say. And something about me is that I really got to understand what those words mean, submit to God. And I had to understand, that God's redirection and God's rejection is His protection. For example, you hear probably more about my testimony, my personal testimony, but I will say it is kind of along the lines of Jonah's testimony in the Bible. So Jonah in the Bible, if you know, he was very disobedient. I was very disobedient. And God gave Jonah a strict command to go to Nineveh to preach the gospel, preach a message. Jonah was like, no. So he decided to do what he was doing. Got swallowed by a whale. And the whale spat him right out onto the shores of Nineveh. He stayed for 3 nights in the belly of the fish. And it spit him out right on the shore of Nineveh. So it's kind of like my testimony, in a sense. You hear about it. God did redirect me, and He gave me a peace that transcended all understanding. And thankfully, out of all the things I could have disobeyed God for in my life, and I obeyed Him on this one because that peace transcended all human understanding. It was like, yes, I understand it now. Like our kids now, they say. And basically, what I want to tie this into is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6, where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all ways, submit to Him and He shall make your path straight. So, what does that entail? See, if you don't submit to God fully, there will be problems. There will be chaos. God will use a lesson to teach you what you were missing out on. It'll either be a blessing or a lesson. If you're obedient, you'll get blessed. He's still gonna bless you anyway. But if you're disobedient, He'll put you through a lesson. For example, speaking of like divine intervention, this concept of God intervening, I want to reference the book of Acts where the apostle Paul, wants to go preach the gospel in China, not China, Asia. And pretty much the Holy Spirit was like, no. Holy Spirit was like, you're gonna go to Macedonia. And, he ended up trusting in God's plan, and the gospel was better preached in Macedonia than Asia. And this is how we have the Bible, because Paul covered most of the New Testament. So this is where we got that everything from. So if Paul disobeyed God and the Holy Spirit, then we wouldn't have had everything as we have right now. Maybe we would have, but it would have had like a whole story where Paul had to undergo a lesson or something because he was disobedient. But you see, when you trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding and you submit to Him in all ways, you shall experience that peace, even if it feels confusing, even if you feel lost, even if you feel like you don't know where life is taking you. Well, not necessarily life, but where God is taking you. Trust in Him. And, I would say too that God does have you where you want to be and where He wants you to be, for a reason. So trust that He has you where He wants you to be and He will take you. For He shall never leave your side. And I want you to understand that we have such a loving God that He shall never leave our sides. Another examples I could go on is like Jesus, with And when he was being crucified for the passion, I would say that he had 72,000 angels on standby. He could have called on the whole army, 12 legions, but he didn't, He trusted in God's plan. God had the option to divinely intervene, but Jesus went through it. He was like, nah, I'd rather defeat sin. I love these people. Whether they hate me or they love me or they just don't care, I'm gonna go through it. So, my message here today, is even though you may feel confused or lost or whatever, however you feel like you don't know, you just clueless. Trust in God and trust that He has a plan. I love you. If y'all want more videos, don't follow me, follow Jesus. Alright? That's my only message. I love you. God bless.